Greg Bakun here. I've told you about the out-of-the-world roast beef sandwiches at Maverick's Real Roast Beef, but I haven't told you about their Philly steak sandwiches, turkey bacon avocado sandwich, BLT, crispy chicken, fish sandwiches, brisket, or pulled pork. Okay, you get the idea. They make a lot of delicious food to the same standard as their famous roast beef sandwiches, and now I'm starving. I'm going to go to Maverick's Real Roast Beef off Lexington and Roseville, and you need to go too. Check out their menu at mavericksbeef.com.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host, guest, random reptoid, or chupacabra may not necessarily reflect those of AM 950 Radio, its affiliates, or its sponsors. Now, it's time to step into the unknown. There are things people experience but never talk about. A shadow moving in the corner, flickering of the lights, a disembodied voice. We invite you to talk with us. Share your story, share your experience, because this isn't just your story, this is our story. This is GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
And this is GhostBox Radio on AM 950, where every night we talk about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. You know, if you've listened to the program long enough, you've known that we've done a number of episodes on the JFK assassination, and I love talking about it. We've had people on talking about whether it's a conspiracy or not, and some people saying that it wasn't a conspiracy at all, to a lot of people saying that this is why it is a conspiracy. But one of the things that I find, and maybe this is my fault, is that it feels like that we don't really stray too far from the narrative that we've all been talking about for years and years and years. And that's something that I still enjoy talking about. There's still a lot to get there. And for some reason, I don't feel like I'm digging into different areas that really take a different spin and a different look at what we know. And about 2-3 months ago, I saw that author David L Sloan had written a book that to me, it was just like, okay, now I think that we have something that we can talk about here that certainly I think is an aspect that is new to me, though it shouldn't be, considering the connections. But it's something I really wanted to get David on to talk about. David is also an author of many things. He does Sloan Key West ghost tours, and go to ghostkeywest.com. We'll talk more about that in the program. We've had David on once before because he has also written about and also has a very close connection to Robert the Doll. And a fantastic episode that we've done a few years back on that, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about that as well. The book is called How Key West Killed JFK, the Island That Changed the Course of History. This is a fantastic conversation I think we're going to have, and I'm more than happy to welcome author David L Sloan to the program. David, welcome. How are you doing?
Thanks so much, Greg. It is great to be here. You're doing really good.
Yeah, no, this is really this is something very interesting. And when I say that this shouldn't be that surprising of a topic in a sense, because obviously, you know, Key West is very Cuban influenced, and this is all around the time of the Bay of Pigs invasion. I might be going down the wrong track on this a little bit, and we're gonna pull it all back, but this is really interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about the book to kind of get us started, please?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because people hear the title, How Key West Killed JFK, and a lot of people laugh at first, and they think that it's a joke. I had somebody say, it sounds like a Carl Hiaasen title. and I totally get that because it's counterintuitive. We always think about Dallas when we think about the assassination of JFK. And I stumbled upon this. You know, I mean, I grew up in Dallas, probably 15 minutes from where the assassination took place. And then I've lived in Key West for 30 years. But I was trying to find the missing fire chief in Key West. His name is Bum Fardo. And he disappeared in 1976 after he was convicted of trafficking cocaine. And I started following his trail, and I got these FBI documents and these CIA documents, and I stumbled across one that talked about Lee Harvey Oswald pulling up to the fuel docks in Key West with a boat full of Cuban exiles and refueling. And I'm thinking, what? Lee Harvey Oswald? No way. And then I find a CIA report about Jack Ruby selling guns out of a hotel room in Isla Morada. And then I see this report where it said that Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald were both sighted together in the Key West airport, and that they were boarding a flight for the Fair Play for Cuba committee to go to Cuba. Now, when you see something like that, one report you can dismiss. Two, who knows? With this one, the guy who reported it was the airport director, George Feraldo, and he was a very respected man in town.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he had passed away, but I called his wife and I spoke to her, and I said, I'm reading this report. Do you know anything about this? And she said, oh yeah, he took a photo of the two of them. I have the photo still.
Wow.
And for me, that really clinched it, that something was going on in Key West. And I asked her if we could get together, and she said, well, I'm not feeling well right now, but we can at some point, and we'll have to go through my photos and dig for it. And she passed away before we got to do that.
Oh.
But this made me realize there was something to it. And as I started digging deeper, I found that no matter whether you subscribe to a conspiracy or not, anybody who you name or anybody's named in the assassination of John F. Kennedy, most of them have a direct connection to Key West and the Florida Keys.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I think, speaking only for myself, David, that you think about if you're not researching it the way that you are, or if you're just kind of taking it as it comes at you. You look at Dallas and that's kind of your focal point, and some of us might be wearing blinders that don't see too far beyond. They're not connecting the dots like you are, which is great. Why you are writing and other people are writing books, and you're writing a book like this, because this is really opening up a lot in my mind. And I'm just going to say too, the Jack Ruby getting weapons. I mean, that also ties into, I listened to another program, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, talking about Marita Lorenz and being at that meeting the night before with Jack Ruby and the weapons and everything with that.
Yeah, and there's other reports. You start digging deeper, and there's reports about Jack Ruby trying to trade weapons to Fidel Castro to get Santo Traficante Jr. out of jail, after Castro took over the casinos and took over Cuba. So there's a lot of different pieces that the more you look at them, the more all the different stories start to match up. And what I really wanted to do, I'm a big Key West guy. I don't consider myself a JFK guy, even though I've uncovered some truly amazing things. Key West is my baby. And I wanted to tell the story of Key West during the Cold War era, because nobody really talked about it. Nobody talked about the influence of the mafia in the Florida Keys, about the heroin trafficking through here. Even with Prohibition, us being so close to Cuba, we were really the pipeline for anything illegal coming into the United States. And nobody talked about Meyer Lansky and Santo Traficante and all of those people who were down here. So I wanted to tell that story. And of course, that involved Kennedy coming here and so many other presidents. And then from there, everything that went down with the Cuban Missile Crisis, you look at the stories and you think it's just insane. And what blew my mind, the CIA base. The CIA had the largest covert base in the world right at the gateway to the Florida Keys. And there were all types of missions running out of the different keys trying to take down Cuba.
Wow. I mean, it's incredible. And so, as you said, JFK down in Key West, other presidents. Why are they down? And why was JFK down in Key West?
Well, because we were so close to Cuba. The first time he was here, it actually worked out. He had a little conference with Macmillan, and I think Macmillan was over in the Turks and Caicos, and JFK, he had the family compound up in West Palm Beach, and Key West made the good place to meet up. We've always had, for a long time, we've had a very strong naval presence. So we have the military here. It's a great spot that everybody wants to go. But having everything in place where they could get away from the public eye to a good degree, but still have control over the entire country if anything went south, that's one of those things that Key West provided. And, you didn't have to twist anybody's arm to come here.
No. As you say, paradise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the location, the location of Key West, you think it's approximately a 2 mile by 4 mile island. So it's very small, and it is really out in the middle of the ocean. So that small of a piece of land, for it to play such a huge role on the international stage, is pretty astounding. And it's done it again and again and again.
It has. With the JFK connection to his assassination, that hadn't been really talked about, though, right? I mean, apart from maybe some, but I mean, you're really the one that's kind of blowing it open, aren't you?
Yeah, and people have talked about the different elements. Santo Trafficante Jr., he's been brought up a lot, and the different mafia people. And then a lot of people have talked about the Cuban exiles. It's no secret that there were the training camps and on No Name Key and up towards Key Largo in the Everglades. So people have written about these different elements. Fidel Castro has been blamed. The Russians have been blamed. So a lot of that has been brought up. The closest thing, there was an incredible investigation done by Gaetan Fonzi, and that was done in the 70s. And he was saying, look at Miami, so he was pinpointing it pretty close because there was so much going on in Miami. But with everything in Miami, you look, okay, you've got that, and then you've got this stuff in Cuba, and right in between, the whole football field for it is Key West and the Florida Keys.
I mean, it seems pretty obvious, actually, when you really stop and think about it, that it's like the perfect place, like you said, so that, in one that maybe people aren't, really thinking about. So it makes a lot of sense. You know what I think I'd like to do? I think I'd like to go ahead, get our first break in now, because when we come back, I want to kind of change the tact a little bit. I don't want to be interrupted by having to take a break. So, folks, stick around. We're going to really get into the book. The book, once again, is How Key West Killed JFK, the island that changed the course of history. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I've been talking for a while about how spooky, fun, and fascinating the Minneapolis trolley tours are. But now there's big news. The Candlelight Ghost Tours now begin at the historic Pillsbury Club, a beautifully restored haunted mansion once owned by Charles Pillsbury himself. Believe it or not, the interior is nearly 200 years older than the exterior. How is that possible? You'll have to come out and find out. Before or after your tour, stop by the on-site market featuring a curated collection of handmade goods, artisan crafts, and locally inspired treasures. Perfect for picking up a keepsake to remember your haunting adventure. You'll also find exclusive spooky merchandise from Tales of the Crypt and Elvira. Then, climb aboard the climate-controlled trolley as we travel through Minneapolis' haunted hotspots, uncovering ghost stories that locals would rather keep buried. The mansion is restored to perfection, and there is no better way to spend an evening. Visit MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for tickets and more information. Have you ever met someone who not only can help you on a deep spiritual level, but also potentially change your life? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who travels the nation and lives right here in the Midwest. And she offers mediumship, mentorship, house and business parties, energy healing, palm readings, and so much more. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
Hi, this is Psychic Medium Deb. I cannot wait to hear from you. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
Greg Bakun here. Like you, I love good, fresh, delicious food. So I want to tell you about this treasure in Roseville called Maverick's Real Roast Beef. Maverick's has the best roast beef sandwiches I've ever had. Made fresh every order. Add fries or onion rings dropped in the fryer when ordered, and you have a winning combination. Maverick's Real Roast Beef has a lot more than roast beef, so check out their website, mavericksbeef.com, or check out their restaurant on Lexington in Roseville. Greg Bakun here. It's nice to get out of the Twin Cities and take some travel excursion to some great locations. Minnesota has so much to offer, which is why I love traveling down to Wabasha and staying at the historic Anderson House Hotel. Opened in 1856, this beautiful hotel offers comfortable accommodations, has a delicious restaurant, and even a speakeasy in the basement to unwind with a drink. Located next to the Mississippi River and on Main Street, there is a lot of sightseeing and shopping to do too. To get more information, go to theandersonhousehotel.com. And welcome back to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. My name is Greg Bakun. We have a great program tonight. We are talking about a new book that came out a couple months ago, came out in November actually, called How Key West Killed JFK, the Island That Changed the Course of History, written by author David L Sloan. We're going to get into that in a second, but I would like to ask folks if you feel so obliged to that. First of all, you do want to get this book because this is very, very detailed, very good. And as the description says, it's for the casual reader, but it's also for the diehard JFK researchers. So you really want to check it out. But we have it up on ghostboxradio.com, Ghostbox Book Club. And if you wouldn't mind picking it up through our Amazon affiliated link, that helps the show directly. Would really appreciate it if you have done so. But before we get back to the book itself, David, you got a lot of stuff going on. Can we first talk about Sloan's Key West ghost tours?
Yeah, I'm actually celebrating 30 years
Wow.
of ghost tours here in Key West. We were one of the first ghost tours in the country, and it kind of evolved through the years. You know, we started with a ghost tour, and then we introduced equipment and started doing ghost hunts. And now we do the tours inside of the most haunted buildings in Key West. So we've got America's Most Haunted Firehouse, which is this great 1907 firehouse that's been turned into a firehouse museum. And I'd say that actually creeps me out more than 40 Smartello, where Robert the Doll is.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And we do tours in both. But I mean, I've been around Robert for a long time, and those spirits are more diversified, I guess. But
Sure.
at the firehouse, you know, they're all protectors because they were firefighters, but they like messing with people. And when you walk in, you can just feel their presence. You can feel everybody stop and stare at you. And we do a combination of, we do an audio ghost tour, but it's got the music and the narration where you feel like you're walking through a movie.
Nice.
So it's very immersive and keeps you very alone. You don't have to deal with tour guides. And then we give you all this cool equipment and let you do your own cold case investigation using paranormal tools to try to find out, like, you know, who killed Bumfardo, you know, who the little boy spirit is. A lot of the mysteries that we just don't know the answers to. So people get to help out with that.
That is super cool.
Yeah.
I want to do that.
It's so much fun. I mean, I think that's the next thing that's going to happen with ghost tours, you know, because it becomes very immersive and people get to go at their own pace and they actually get to help solve things.
That is really nice. Now, for those of you who want to take part in this, you need to go to ghostkeywest.com, ghostkeywest.com, and I'll put the link all over the place. And I'm looking on your page right now, and you can choose your paranormal adventure. You just said America's Most Haunted Firehouse, Robert the Doll After Dark, which I got to say, David, I told you I was at this parafair this last weekend at the Anderson House in Wabasha, and because I was talking about, people are asking me what's coming up on the show this week, and I said, well, I'm having this conversation about JFK with David L Sloan, but you also will know He has done written about Robert the Doll, and they all are just like, oh my God, I don't even want to. They're just really. But yeah, I mean, so you got that, and then also I see Key West UFO tour.
Yeah, and this is amazing. We just relaunched this, and there's a really cool UFO history in Key West, and it's funny because I with the UFO conspiracies, I was a little bit on the fence. I've seen stuff out there. I've seen these craft. I never know if it's military or aliens. I always lean more towards the military side.
Yeah.
But I got a call and somebody told me things to start researching. And I'm like, oh my God, the history goes back to Thomas Edison being here in 1918. And there's a whole strange history. It involves different presidents. People who are into UFO stuff will know about the Majestic 12.
Yep.
Most of them were down here in Key West, and they'll claim every president that they involve was down in Key West, especially Truman, who was here for about 180 days, made his little White House here. But what the cool thing with the UFOs, we have a $5,000 military grade night vision scope where the stars are beautiful in Key West anyway. But when people look through this thing, their mouths drop open. They say, oh my God. And you can see beyond the stars. And we see some very interesting things moving around.
Wow. I'm in. You don't have to ask me twice. I'm in.
Yeah.
To me, that sounds like another book, quite frankly.
Yeah. And I'm working on that. It's, I'm really immersing myself in it. And I shake my head a lot of times at history because I'm like, I'll be damned, another thing matches up. And what they say is that there's the underwater base here. And when you look, there's this triangulation between Key West and Guantanamo and a place called Altec in the Bahamas. And that's where all the area is centered between. So it's not the Bermuda Triangle, but it's more like a UFO triangle or an alien triangle. And
I'm sorry. I was just going to say it's interesting because I was going to mention that I feel like, over the last 15, 20 years and with the congressional hearings that we've had, we have been seeing more and more and hearing more and more about the idea of UAPs and whatnot coming out of water, or going in water and not really understanding what's going on. Are there bases? Is there something else there? So I was wondering about that.
Yeah, and there's a sinkhole. It's called the NR1 sinkhole. It's about 40 miles off the coast of Key West. And scientists discovered it, I forget if it's 10 or 20 years ago. But when they found it, they said, well, that's weird because a sinkhole should not exist at that depth because apparently they need air to form. And this one has never been exposed. So that one still baffles their minds. And that's one of the places that we look at and think it's a potential, I don't know if you'd call it a portal or a base. The propulsion systems that are in use kind of defy anything that we know. And that seems to be true both below the surface and above.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Are people going, a lot of people going on that tour? Because that just sounds amazing.
Yeah. And, we just relaunched it maybe 2 weeks ago. And we keep it small. We only take 6 people out. So everybody gets plenty of time with the night vision scope. But we're seeing things, I'd say probably 7 out of 10 times. We're seeing something where people say, I don't know what that was.
That's great. I love that. Okay. And then I also see on the site, Private with David Sloan. What's going on there?
Yes. I don't do all the tours myself. We've got a nice tight team, most of the guys I've worked with for a long time. But I wanted to give people kind of my 3 top places, which are the hanging grounds outside the old jail in Key West, America's Most Haunted Firehouse, and Robert the Doll. Mm-hmm. So I started offering a private tour where, 2-hour tour, I'll take up to 5 people for a flat rate. And I'll take them to each of those places and, provide the transport in between and really tailor something for them that will give them the best of Key West hauntings.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, no, someday I'm going to need to get down there and check that out.
Yeah.
we're gonna have to have you back on, and we talked with you about Robert the Doll a few years ago, but maybe sometime I'd love to get you back and talk about all that, as well as the rest of what's going on in Key West as well.
That'd be real good, because since we last talked, I've uncovered a lot of new things about Robert the Doll.
Ooh, yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that for sure. Tonight, though, we are talking about your newest book, How Key West Killed JFK, the island that changed the course of history. And this is, you know what I like about this book as well? It's a good sized book, but not overly big. It comes in about 217 pages. Where we left off, the thing that I was kind of curious about, because there was so much going on with what affects Cuba at this period of time, as well as what was affecting Key West at the period of time, which also included Cuba at that period of time. How much of the desire to assassinate JFK had to do with the attempted takeover, regime change of Cuba versus the mob scene in Key West and Florida, and really all over?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because pretty much everybody hated Castro and everybody hated Kennedy. So, and you look at the mafia. Trafficante used to have all the casinos over in Cuba, and when that was taken away, they start looking for other places. And he already had his fingers in Key West with the Bolita, and they had the drugs coming through here. So this was a good possibility. They wanted that casino money. With the mafia, they had helped get John F. Kennedy elected. Okay, they used their networking to tell people, go out and vote for this person. And then when he got in there, he put his brother in charge of like being a mafia czar to shut down the mafia. And they saw this as a huge betrayal. Yeah. So you got the mafia families who are like, well, what's this guy doing? So they wanted him dead. Now, you also had the government, the CIA was working. They pretty much hired the mafia to take out Castro at the same time. So Castro knows there's all these assassination attempts going on with him. So he had every reason to say, all right, great, the United States is trying to kill me. Let's kill their leader instead. And then you just look at the people who are in Key West. A lot of people don't realize that Jimmy Hoffa and the Teamsters bought up most of the island. You had the historic district, and you had all this undeveloped land on the other side of the island. And through the Key West Corporation, with Teamster funding, they bought up huge tracts of land to develop. They bought up the La Concha Hotel, the Casa Marina Hotel. They built a dog track. Fidel Castro, when he was raising money for his revolution, came and spoke at that dog track. So you have all these circles that are linking together. And then you have to understand that the people of Key West, with a huge Cuban population, they were very much against communism. And the CIA wanted to take down the communists, and they did that by teaming up with the Tampa Mafia, the Mafia in general, to bring in drugs, sell the drugs for money for guns, to take over the communist countries.
Wow.
And you go through these reports, there's over 6 million pages of reports in the JFK assassination documents. And I focused on the ones that were right here in the Florida Keys. And to me, it tells the most fascinating story. And that's what my intention was initially, to tell the Key West story. I wanted this to be a book. Most of the conspiracy theory books name too many names in too many places people aren't familiar with, and it gets very difficult to follow.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I really tried to avoid. I wanted this to be a beach read. And one of the cool Key West aspects is a guy named Gilberto Policarpo Lopez. And he was from Cuba, but his mom was from Key West, and he was a baker here in Key West. And he is named as a suspect in the assassination in many, many reports. And I said, I want to tell his story. And as you know, when I started digging into him, this story took on a whole new life, and it changed what the book was about in general.
It's because I know that we don't want to give the entire book away, right?
I don't mind.
But I mean, what happened on November 22nd, 1963 in Dallas was not the only shooting that day. Do you want to talk about that as well?
So here's the interesting thing. Everybody talks about Lee Harvey Oswald being the shooter. Some people say there's a second or third shooter. I try to stay away from everything that happened in Dallas, because that's, you could write 1,000 books about that and everybody will argue about a different point, and there's an equal argument against each one. But what I found was fascinating about Gilberto Lopez, the reason that he is suspected, even though he was living in Key West, came here in 1960, married a Key West girl. They ended up moving to Tampa. They got in an argument and she left. He was in Tampa when President Kennedy came through. He attended meetings of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. He had so many parallels to Lee Harvey Oswald. And then the night that Kennedy was assassinated, Gilberto Lopez crossed the Texas border into Mexico. He went to Mexico City and he was in a hotel for a couple of days, and then he boarded a flight to Cuba where he was the only passenger. There were 9 crew members. And then intelligence came in through Mexico saying Gilberto Lopez is a suspect in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And you started looking at it, and the CIA and the FBI had some investigative reports that they failed to give to the Warren Commission. And the last anybody heard from Gilberto Lopez was beginning of 1964, where he refused to repay the members of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee who had lent him money. He was unemployed and he was playing dominoes, and then poof, he's gone from the record. So I'm thinking, all right, here's a guy who so many people are saying played a part. Some people, the National Enquirer ran a story saying, based on a book that somebody wrote, saying that he was the second shooter and that there's proof. But nobody's ever been able to place him in Dallas. Nobody's ever been able to place guns in his hand. And I said, he might be alive. I'm going to go to Cuba and find him.
So I'm a little confused, because the research I did on him says that he was actually in Dallas, that they fired a rifle at a Cuban diplomat inside the Cuban consulate. Just minute, it's not too long before the JFK assassination, and that he was arrested, put into jail, where people just that he was in jail, there's no way that he could have been a part of it. And I had always wondered if all that is a red herring, so that he could be placed somewhere.
So that's the first I've heard of that. So I don't know if that's someone else, because there's with all the research I did, everybody knew he was in Texas, but nobody could ever place him in Dallas. And that's why I wanted to find him, and because there's 60 years of missing history here. But when I started to look where to find him, I discovered he had returned to the United States in 1995. And he was living in plain sight in the heart of the Cuban exile community, right there in Hialeah, Florida.
Okay.
Now, he died. He died in 2021, but he had a daughter. And I tracked the daughter down, and she agreed to talk with me. And she filled in all the missing years.
Did she?
Yeah. And that's where things really took a change, because she told me that, yes, he had talked to his family and told them that he had taken a Greyhound bus from Tampa to Dallas. He told them that he had been in Dallas when the president was assassinated. He did not admit to being a part of it, but he said he was there. She shared with me that he was a hardcore communist all the way, and that he attended communist meetings when he was in Dallas. And when I talked to her, she shared these very tragic stories about his violence towards her and her sister and her mom. And it painted this picture of someone who was definitely capable of pulling the trigger in Dallas.
Oh, wow. Why don't we go ahead and do this? I want to go ahead and get our next break in here. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation. We're having this great conversation with author David L Sloan talking about how Key West killed JFK. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I've been talking for a while about how spooky, fun, and fascinating the Minneapolis trolley tours are, but now there's big news. The Candlelight Ghost Tours now begin at the historic Pillsbury Club, a beautifully restored haunted mansion once owned by Charles Pillsbury himself. Believe it or not, the interior is nearly 200 years older than the exterior. How is that possible? You'll have to come out and find out. Before or after your tour, stop by the on-site market featuring a curated collection of handmade goods, artisan crafts, and locally inspired treasures, perfect for picking up a keepsake to remember your haunting adventure. You'll also find exclusive spooky merchandise from Tales of the Crypt and Elvira. Then, climb aboard the climate-controlled trolley as we travel through Minneapolis' haunted hotspots, uncovering ghost stories that locals would rather keep buried. The mansion is restored to perfection, and there is no better way to spend an evening. Visit MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for tickets and more information. Have you ever met someone who not only can help you on a deep spiritual level, but also potentially change your life? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who travels the nation and lives right here in the Midwest. And she offers mediumship, mentorship, house and business parties, energy healing, palm readings, and so much more. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
Hi, this is Psychic Medium Deb. I cannot wait to hear from you. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
Greg Bakun here. Like you, I love good, fresh, delicious food. So I want to tell you about this treasure in Roseville called Maverick's Real Roast Beef. Maverick's has the best roast beef sandwiches I've ever had. Made fresh every order. Add fries or onion rings dropped in the fryer when ordered, and you have a winning combination. Maverick's Real Roast Beef has a lot more than roast beef, so check out their website, mavericksbeef.com, or check out their restaurant on Lexington in Roseville. Greg Bakun here. It's nice to get out of the Twin Cities and take some travel excursion to some great locations. Minnesota has so much to offer, which is why I love traveling down to Wabasha and staying at the historic Anderson House Hotel. Opened in 1856, this beautiful hotel offers comfortable accommodations, has a delicious restaurant, and even a speakeasy in the basement to unwind with a drink. Located next to the Mississippi River and on Main Street, there is a lot of sightseeing and shopping to do too. To get more information, go to theandersonhousehotel.com. And join me tomorrow on GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. We are going to be doing a replay from October of 2023. We're going to have a conversation with Daryl Marston about his book. It was new at the time, but it's still an amazing book, The Horrors of the House of Wills. We had a great conversation about that way back. And we're going to replay that tomorrow. Friday, of course, Casual Friday. So please make sure you take part in that, and we'll have Question of the Week and all that good stuff. But we are talking with author David L Sloan. We're talking about how Key West killed JFK, the island that changed the course of history. This is available as a paperback right now. It's available everywhere that you get books. If you go to a local bookseller, if they don't have it, you can order it to try to keep business at the local bookseller level. Or if you'd like to, please consider getting it through GhostBox Radio at the GhostBox Book Club. What that does is you can use the Amazon affiliated link, and what that will do is just help out the show. We'd really appreciate it. We're going to kind of talk about a lot of different things here in our last segment here. David, we're going to talk about who Cookie Machine is first, right?
Yeah. Cookie Machine's incredible. He's a legend in Key West. Big guy. He used to lift refrigerators up above his head. That's how strong he was. And he was also the brother-in-law of Gilberto Lopez. And it was funny. I drove to Tampa to see Cookie. And he told me that Gilberto when they were up there, because he spent a lot of time with his sister and Gilberto. And he said he had a lot of interesting things to say, but he said Gilberto came over and that he was very sick. And he told the story that he had escaped on a raft, that he had been in a prison in Cuba. And Cookie said Gilberto was always looking over his shoulder. He was always as if someone was following him. And then he didn't like talking on the phone. And he didn't like using his own name. And something very interesting, he talked about Gilberto working at the Columbia restaurant in Tampa. And this was a big hangout for the Tampa Mafia. So that was something that put Gilberto in that side of the conspiracy. Nobody had ever connected him to the Tampa Mafia. I was able to do that, not just through his employment at Columbia Restaurant, but also his sister was married into a family that had the connections with the Mafia there. So I go to meet Cookie, and I was talking to my mom on the way up, and she said, "You better be careful. He might be there. He might just be luring you there to kill you." And I met Cookie. I picked him up at his house, and he was the best. And he shared some really incredible stories. And for me, I asked him questions about Gilberto, and he's telling me stories, and he's telling me stories. And I said, "Did you ever see him with guns?" He said, "Yeah, he had a duffel bag full of guns, but my sister wouldn't let him bring him into the house." And then I asked Cookie, I said, "Did he ever mention Dallas?" And he kind of looked at me. He goes, "Yeah, him and my sister got in a big fight about him going to Dallas. How do you know that?"
Wow.
And I said, "Well, he's a suspect in the assassination of John F. Kennedy." And Cookie goes back. He goes, "Whoa." And he held his arm up. He said, "Look at this. Look at this." The hair in his arms was standing straight up. He had never heard that Gilberto was involved. So that was the first time he heard it. And seeing his reaction made everything that he said that much more important, that he knew these things without knowing the connection. So that was all very valuable. And he was able to tell me so much about his sister and so much about Gilberto. And that was the great missing pieces before I spoke to Gilberto's daughter. And I'll tell you, afterwards, I drove Cookie back to his house, and we got up to his house, and I said, "Hey, thanks so much." He goes, "Wait, before I get out of the car, I got to text my friend. They said you were probably coming here to kill me. I have to let him know that I'm still alive." So we both thought that the other one was going to kill the other one. And with the subject matter, that's not surprising.
No, it isn't, I suppose.
There's so much mystery, and there's so many people involved on so many levels that you really don't know what's safe to talk about and what's not.
That's a really interesting point. And the fact, nearly, just over 62 years later, it's still that way, right?
Yeah, to such a degree, because people will argue anything back and forth. And there are so many misinformation agents out there. There are plausible deniability is what everybody wants. That's what the mafia wants. That's what the government wants. That's what anybody involved wants. People can point the finger at you, but the more people who are taking the blame, the less any one of them is believed. So for whoever actually did this, and I've got my theories just like anyone else, and there will be people who look at me and say, "Oh, you're ridiculous. You're a joke. It was only Lee Harvey Oswald." And to that I'll say, well, Lee Harvey Oswald was in Key West. So,
yeah.
But it really is an interesting environment. And what I'm most proud of with this book, talking to Gilberto Lopez's daughter, he's always had so many parallels to Lee Harvey Oswald. And by knowing him, Oswald died almost immediately and was never able to talk. And even though Gilberto Lopez is dead, he had about 60 additional years. And through the daughter, we get these stories, and we do know his ideologies. We do know that he could be violent. We do know that he was with Castro. We know that he was part of the Tampa Mafia. And the best thing, we now have photographs of him. There was one photo that existed before, and he was wearing dark sunglasses, and it was taken at night in Mexico City. So you couldn't really tell what he looked like. In the book, I've published a half dozen photographs of him through all the years, from when he was a young man to when he was an old man. So pre-assassination to just before he died. And I think, it's not going to be me, but there are JFK assassination researchers out there who are very familiar with photos from Dealey Plaza, photos from different training camps. I think they're going to be able to look at this photo and say, aha, I know who that was. And I think it has the possibility to prove a conspiracy.
So we are talking about David L Sloan's new book, How Key West Killed JFK, The Island That Changed the Course of History, available on Amazon or GhostBox Book Club on ghostboxradio.com through the Amazon link. So I want to kind of reemphasize that point that you just made, because that's not a small point, that you, with the research you've done, tracking down Lopez's daughter, having a conversation with her, you have been able to provide visual records of someone that for the past 60 to some years of this assassination, a name's been floating around, but no one really knew what he looked like. Now they have this. That's huge.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the books out there, they try to sell by saying we've solved the assassination, and they say this is it. That's something that I don't try to do because I don't think that's what I've done, but I do believe that the information that I've uncovered has the potential to solve the assassination, or at least prove the conspiracy beyond a reasonable doubt. And to me, that's very cool. And like I said, I don't think I'm going to be the one to do it, but other people will be able to utilize this research.
I have an interesting question, and I don't know, maybe they're one and the same thing. Do you think it's what would you rather see? Solve the assassination, or at the very least be able to say we have proof of a conspiracy, we have a proof of more than one shooter?
I'm not sure any of it matters
at all.
Because you look at it from different ways, and people love the entertainment value. I think there are enough diversions out there that even if the truth is presented, there are going to be people who are going to say, no, that's not it. I think everybody's living in their own reality as far as this goes. So I have a completely different lens of the JFK assassination community now than I did before. I used to think that there were a lot of serious researchers, people who I've reached out to compare notes. I don't get responses. A lot of people like the echo chamber and have their theory and only want that to move forward. And I'm not saying there's not anybody who won't look at everything, but it's a group. It's an interesting group of people.
Well, and I suppose, and over time, we're talking about, you're talking about earlier with some books that they try to fit in so many locations and stuff. And I suppose it's just a given that over time, the further away you get from it, it's more of like you're starting to get more of a global view of it, where, there is just a whole lot. And I do think it makes some sense to be able to, especially because you have such a connection, that you're going to focus on one area, and that's a story on its own that needs to be told, rather than having to try to fit everything in.
Yeah, I think for the historical record, a lot of the information that I'm getting out there is important, and I think it will help.
Oh yeah,
I think it will further things, and yeah, it's all very interesting. So many people who are around then are dead, but the assassination, it continues to take in. I mean, people being born today are still going to grow up and say, wow, what's going on there? What happened? And I'd like to think that with new advances in technology and with new information coming out all the time, I think maybe we'll find, you look at DNA, and 30 years ago, people never would have thought that would solve things. So who knows what's next with technology? I think one day there will be something that says this definitively is what happened with the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And I think we'll look at that and some people will be like, well, I was right about this and I was wrong about that. And I think other people will say, I don't care. That's not right.
That's where I was going. You guys, I was just gonna say to you, it's gonna be funny someday. Maybe Lopez's daughter is going to find a letter that he wrote saying definitively, I was the one who shot. And you could have that sort of thing, and people are still going to be, no way, that's not true. That's not what happened. You know, it's funny how, I mean, I personally, I don't think it's ever going to be solved. And just for that matter alone, that people are still, because I don't think, you know, to your point, like, oh, it doesn't really matter. I think people in some ways maybe don't ever want to see it solved because it's been around so long now.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that does keep the intrigue going. You know, and I think we all love stories. And I think this tells so many fascinating stories about so many different parts of America. You know, and you can look at the different angles, and it really is a reflection on us and who we are as people. And now we can look back and say, hey, who were we back in the 60s? Who are we today? And have we gotten better or have we gotten worse?
And the fact that, you know, it's for those of us who weren't around at that time, you know, the whole idea of like how big of a role Cuba had played in those times in the 60s for even affecting people up where I'm in the Midwest. You know, people these days won't understand what that's like. They don't understand, like, my dad was, my parents thought that my dad was going to be called into action as, you know, part of the military and whatnot, you know, be called to be a part of that. You know, so I mean, it's a good reminder too, for, like you said, for history to be reminded what was going on during that time.
Yeah, I mean, the beaches in Key West, people look at them now and think paradise. They were lined with Hawk missiles, you know, barbed wire all on the beaches. Everybody in Key West thought, oh my God, we're going to die. And because a missile from Cuba, 30 seconds, a minute, you know, people in Key West were freaked out. And so was the rest of America.
Isn't it something? And this is quite the book. And folks, I just want to remind you all, it is available over on Amazon. You can also, you know, ask your local bookseller if they can bring it in if they don't have it, or go over to GhostBox Radio, GhostBox Book Club, use the Amazon affiliated link. Also, I just want to remind folks about ghostkeywest.com. Just go there, check out what's going on, check out tours, everything else, because if you come on down there, there's going to be really a lot to enjoy and talk about. Anything else I'm missing, David, before we let you go in this conversation?
No, I really appreciate you having me on. You know, most of my books are on Amazon. I've got about 30 of them out there, most of them about Key West. People can check out the titles on phantompress.com or learn more about me. If they're in Key West, I invite them to come check me out.
Awesome.
Just don't bring any guns.
David L Sloan, thank you very much. We got to get going. We'll be back tomorrow with Daryl Marston. Everyone, have a fantastic night.